Imagine being dragged into a medieval courtroom. The air is heavy with incense and smoke, the crowd is whispering, and all eyes are fixed on one unfortunate man. He has been accused not of theft, not of murder, not of witchcraft, but of something far more humiliating in that world: impotence. His wife has declared before the church and the court that her husband cannot perform his marital duties. In a society where marriage was sacred, where property and lineage were bound to children, this was not simply a private shame. It was a matter for the law. And so begins one of the strangest and most humiliating traditions of the Middle Ages: the trial by sex. This bizarre practice, sometimes called the trial by Congress, was no myth. It was a real legal process where a man accused of sexual weakness would be forced to prove himself in front of witnesses. Sometimes doctors or priests would examine him. Sometimes neighbors would whisper their testimony. And in the worst cases, the couple themselves were ordered to consummate their marriage under supervision. Imagine the pressure. A room full of officials, family members, even clergy, waiting for you to prove that you were capable of doing what nature intended. Failure was devastating, and success was hardly better, for the gossip of such a spectacle would haunt the couple forever. The roots of this practice lie deep in medieval Europe, in a time when the church governed not only faith, but nearly every corner of life. Marriage was not a private affair. It was a sacred sacrament, designed for reproduction. A man who could not fulfill this duty was not simply disappointing his wife, he was breaking the order of God. A barren marriage threatened inheritance, threatened alliances, and threatened the very foundation of society as the church understood it. So when a woman declared her husband impotent, the church took her seriously. Too seriously. What would follow was a process that combined ritual humiliation with crude pseudoscience. The man would first be summoned to court. He would stand as his wife described his alleged failings before a panel of judges, sometimes including priests, bishops, or noblemen. Then came the examination. Physicians would be called to inspect him. They would check his body, often in front of witnesses. They would test whether he could achieve an erection, whether he responded to stimulation, whether he was, in their words, a man or not. It is difficult to imagine a more degrading spectacle, yet this was only the beginning. If the physicians could not decide, the ultimate test was ordered: the trial by Congress. Husband and wife were instructed to attempt intercourse in a chamber where witnesses were stationed, sometimes hidden behind screens, sometimes brazenly present at the bedside. Their task was to report to the court whether penetration had occurred. This was considered proof of potency. But think for a moment, what man, dragged through such shame, could possibly succeed under such conditions? Even today, medical science recognizes performance anxiety. In the Middle Ages, with one's honor, marriage, and eternal soul on the line, the chance of failure was nearly certain. The consequences of this trial were dire. If the man succeeded, his wife could be shamed for bringing false accusations, and yet he too carried the stain of public gossip. If he failed, his marriage could be annulled, his property threatened, and his reputation destroyed. To be declared impotent in medieval society was worse than a death sentence. It was social exile. Songs and jokes would follow the man for life. His name might even appear in court records as a proven failure, an eternal humiliation recorded in parchment for generations. Real cases from France, England, and Italy survive in dusty archives. In one, a French noblewoman accused her husband of impotence after months of a barren marriage. The court demanded a test. Physicians examined the man and claimed he was healthy. Still unsatisfied, the wife insisted on the trial by Congress. The couple was ordered to perform in the presence of officials. He failed, and the marriage was dissolved. The story spread quickly through the town, becoming a tale whispered in markets and taverns. Another case in England ended when the husband refused the act altogether, saying he would rather be judged guilty than expose himself to such humiliation. The court granted his wife freedom, and he bore the shame forever. The cruelty of this practice lay not only in the act itself, but in the way it reduced private intimacy to public theater. The marriage bed, a place of trust and vulnerability, was turned into a courtroom stage. Neighbors might be summoned to testify about whether they had ever heard the sounds of intimacy through the walls. Servants might be questioned about stained sheets. Virginity tests were performed on brides, examining bed linens after the wedding night to confirm their purity. All of this reflected a world where sexuality was never private, where every act of the body was subject to law and religion. It is tempting to laugh at the absurdity of these trials, but beneath the humor lies tragedy. Men were shamed beyond repair. Women were often trapped, for if their husbands succeeded in the test, they were bound to a marriage they despised. The church cloaked these practices in holiness, claiming to defend the sanctity of marriage, but in truth, it was voyeurism and cruelty institutionalized. It revealed the deep obsession with control that defined the medieval world. Control of bodies, control of desire, control of reproduction. The same church that condemned lust and fornication became the ultimate judge of sexual performance. Why did people accept this? The answer lies in fear and faith. To medieval people, God's order was absolute. Marriage was not simply a union of two people, but a divine command to produce children. If that command failed, something was terribly wrong. Better to expose shame in the courtroom than to risk eternal damnation. And so the trials continued, century after century, until slowly, with the rise of modern medicine and changing views of marriage, the practice faded. Yet the records remain, shocking reminders of how far society can go in policing the most private corners of human life. Imagine the whispered terror of men summoned to court. Imagine the desperation of women who saw annulment as their only escape from an unwanted union. Imagine the smirks of officials who turned human intimacy into spectacle. This was not rare. It was part of the fabric of medieval justice, as real as the stocks, the gallows, or the burning stake. Trial by sex stands today as one of the strangest symbols of a time when privacy did not exist, when shame was a tool of power, and when even the bedroom belonged to the church. And so the story lingers, told in hushed tones across centuries. The trial by sex was not merely a bizarre custom. It was a mirror of a world where fear ruled, where intimacy became evidence, and where the law intruded upon the most human of acts. It reminds us that history is not only kings and battles, but the strange and painful ways ordinary people were judged. And in that mirror, we might even see reflections of our own world, where privacy is fragile, where shame still wields power, and where the past, however strange, is never truly gone.